Hey Lisa, thanks for joining.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, good. Always an honor to connect with you. I just adore the work you're doing, and I think you're here for a purpose. I really believe that the universe aligned me with you so that you can kick off January 2024.
Well, I'm excited to kick off January 2024. New year, new season. So many amazing new things can happen in that time period. So I'm excited to be here, as always, with you, my dear.
I feel the same way. Well, before we hit record, we were having, I would call like spurts of like, oh, we have to hit record now. And so we now have hit record. And the topic of the season is what could be like more of a loaded term, but unveiling of your path, unveiling maybe of what one would call your narrative story or your purpose. And I'd like to kind of have you back up a little bit and share the um, catalyst of how you started.
I just love the word unveiled, unveiling. And when you said that to me earlier, it reminded me of how this journey for me actually began. And I have a book called Unveiled Beauty, and that really was the opening for this journey and this self discovery and this narrative coaching work. And unveiling is such a beautiful word because it's covering something within you, and the unveiling opens up and adds light to, I believe, what is in our hearts and our souls, and for this conversation, potentially our purpose, right? And I think that word itself just has so much meaning to me because it's the beginning of my journey. And for me, my journey has always been very deeply rooted in words and storytelling. And that is what led me to doing the work as a narrative coach, which is really a unique space within the coaching community. So, yeah, I just absolutely am excited to kind of talk about unveiling and being aligned with that whole idea, because that is truly what happened for me through the art of storytelling and through narratives within my own life.
And you mentioned, and I've known this about you, that you started in corporate. Maybe you could share a little bit about that space and what drew, like what attracted you to this particular niche of narrative and storytelling.
It's so funny when I go on different interviews and podcasts like this. It's so funny. We never know where to start, right? There's so many beginnings. There's so many entry points to our life and the stories that create this beautiful journey that we're on. And for me, I did begin in corporate, and such an amazing experience. I had a lot of challenges with balance and family, but for me, what took me into this space, it was a process. But first and foremost, there was sort of a block of creative energy that I felt like I wasn't leaning into, that began this journey. So I really started out writing and poetry, and it was in that space where I started to unveil, uncover, unravel. These are words that are just so dear to me because those words took me on this journey of finding myself. And through my poetry and through working with women on writing their stories initially, um, I learned about narrative coaching. And for me, narrative coaching is such a perfect space for someone like me who is fascinated by words and curious about how we're connected to them and the stories that are connected to them. And when we go through life and we're challenged with different things that have happened in our past or in our present, oftentimes it is connected to the past. It is connected to a story, it's connected to a belief. And we need to understand and unravel certain aspects of that to really truly understand how to move forward, how to change. And with the work that I do within the narrative coaching space, it's really about the stories that we tell ourselves. It's really about the words that we're choosing to articulate our experiences, to express how we feel. And people don't often think about words. And there's so much meaning attached to words that we don't realize. And I think, one of the greatest examples I give is the word love. It's so basic, but it means something different to every person. And we're attaching an experience, we're attaching people, we're attaching feelings to that word. And so sometimes if we have a challenge in our life and we're attaching something to a word that is not helping us, it's not serving us, we need to understand what that is. We need to unveil, that piece of the story to figure out how do we change that meaning? How do we redefine it? How do we maybe connect different people? And so for me, it's all about these words and the narratives that we create in our life and the stories that we tell. So backing up, I started in this corporate world, but really felt this creative energy that was not being utilized. And I was also on my own healing journey. And that's what opened up the space for me to be able to work with stories, work with women, and using this specific, really specialized approach really fits me and where my passions are. So that's kind of been the journey that I've had up until this point, and it's been quite a journey. It really has.
I love the fact that you mentioned the impact words have, and that you had this love for poetry. So sometimes that can come naturally, and one may not ever put any thought into what is drawing me to poetry. However, you took it further. You took this connection you had with words and poetry and understood that there's a connection or tie that we have to our healing process with those things. So I'd like to understand, maybe this is some question people may not have asked you, but what words did you unveil from your past that you realized that was having either a good impact or maybe not so good as you were attracted to this field of narratives?
Well, that is a really difficult question. And I haven't been asked that question before. When I think about the journey for me, and as I continue to do this deep work with women, for me, it came down to identity. And now, years later, I'm not surprised, but I am a multiracial woman who has just really danced the line, has been at the intersection of so many different worlds. I feel comfortable in many different worlds. I really do sit at this intersection. And I think for me, identity was always something that oh gosh, I just always struggled with, but yet really embraced. It was like this both and experience that I liked the fact that I was all these things and I felt comfortable, but then there were times I felt like I completely didn't belong. And so I really did need to, over the years, unravel that part of me to really come to terms with who I am and where I belong. And so identity was a word that I really had to come to terms with. And I don't know if I'm answering your question exactly right, but what's interesting about identity is narrative coaching work. Some really fantastic narrative coaches do really focus on the identity journey. Like, we begin with who we are, and the ultimate goal is to become who we want to be. especially when we're on this journey of maybe a transition in our lives, or maybe trying to retell an old story of self. That, it's that journey from who we are right now, you know, who we are not, who we want to become, and who we ultimately become. So there's very much a deeper conversation with identity when we're doing a lot of narrative coaching work. And that is tied to the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we tell about ourselves and all of the things that are deeply connected to that. So, and our identity is broken out in so many different ways. So it's like you have to unravel and address all these different elements of your identity and what they mean to you and if they're important to you. So it's, just that's very high level, but you can really get into some very deep discoveries as you start to unveil these different elements within you. And even this past year, I recently unraveled the identity of me being a big sister, me being the oldest sister. So there are different elements within identity that can allow us to do that work and be able to redefine it. I needed to redefine what being a big sister was all about. And there are cultural aspects to that, which you also have to rectify within your own mind as well.
And I believe that what you articulated, maybe consciously or unconsciously, but talked about intersections, and I can relate to that, because it's one thing if you were raised within one, I would say, one culture, one race that was part of that culture or race for many generations. But in your case, having multiple perhaps cultures and races in the United States perhaps added layers of complexity, and knowing who we are and our role within that is it can be challenging, like you were saying, because you've also worked in corporate and you've worked in different spaces. Tell me, what was if there was, the biggest revelation you've had as you've been doing this practice? Because I imagine it's it's a practice. You're probably unveiling more and more as you grow.
Yeah, I think for me, it is knowing that I have the pen, I have control of my story, and that for too long I've allowed society, family, people around me to tell that story, to guide that story, to narrate it when they didn't really have the power to do that. It's my story to tell, and to be rewritten and to edit and to change as I choose to, that serves me and my own growth, healing, identity. And so I think, doing this work daily, practicing it within myself and doing it with other women just reminds me that this is my journey. This is my story, and this is the only story that I'm going to have. So the more that I can write this story to allow me to step into my full self, to allow me to love fully, to accept love, to experience the moments in life, and to appreciate this journey, that is probably the greatest gift, being a narrative coach and being able to help other women see within themselves, for me. And I think narrative coaching for me is just such a beautiful gift and a beautiful approach to this work, because it speaks to me as a person. I'm a creative person, and it allows me to step outside of my story as quote unquote the author, the artist of this painting, this author of this book, right? I can step outside, and then I can step back in when I'm ready. I can step outside of my story, then I can go back into it. I can rewrite the characters that hurt me. I can change the feelings. It's all up to me. And so for me, doing this specific kind of work just speaks to my soul as a storyteller and gives me back my power. I mean, I feel more empowered when I get to write the words and change the words and change the people. And there are many different versions of our truth. It's not an absolute. We have facts that are absolute, but our truth is not an absolute thing. There are many different ways that we can look at our lives. It all depends on our perspective and what we hold as our deepest belief system. And all of that is an opportunity to change the story.
And I believe that there's a whole generation of women who would feel so much, I would say, hope. I mean, I can imagine if I had told my mom that the story isn't over. You can rewrite it or shift the narratives. It's empowering, like you were expressing. What is the most empowering moment you've had in ha- understanding this technique and then applying it to your life, whether it was a personal part of your life or professional, or maybe a blend of both?
Gosh, I don't know if there's one singular moment. It's been an ongoing, all these glimmering moments along the way, and all these women who I've had the opportunity to share space with when they come to that moment where it's like, you work with so many different people. It's that aha moment. And I've worked with women who have gone through years and years of therapy, and there's something different about this approach that's allowing them to recreate. Um, and I think it's all these little small little moments along the way that have been so powerful for me. And being so radically present um, with my clients and with the moments in my life, I think are what is really changing how I see my life.
And
And a reminder. I mean, it's a constant reminder every day of, I say it all the time lately, but it's like, this is it. This is our life. It is extraordinary. And if we keep saying that out loud and we keep writing that story that reinforces that, all the other things are just, they're going to go to the wayside. They're not as important.
I I have so much more to add to that, but one thing you mentioned, I just, oh look, okay, so one tangent, but we're not going to go there. Is that growing up in a very Hindu family and the principles, what I've often been exposed to is the concept of dharma, and what is your dharma? And I'm sure you've been aware of that concept, but you follow your dharma. Well, do you follow your dharma or do you rewrite your dharma? I I find that fascinating that you've taken this approach. It's more of a modern mindful approach to saying you, you're not bound. You can redefine things. That is, again, empowering. You mentioned healing. So
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're good.
No, I want you to do the talking, but you mentioned healing. Can is it too personal to ask what part of you felt needed healing, and how did this work help you or is continuing to help you?
Yeah. Way in the beginning when I began this journey, there was, childhood trauma that I had experienced that I don't know. It's so hard to say. Many years, I think I just buried it, but then over the course of time, started to come to the surface some of the feelings that betrayal and, fear that I was holding on to from being a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And I mean, I laugh now and I literally am not dismissing it. And, but I say those words only for people to understand as a frame of reference, because those I do not even identify as that. And for some people, using the word survivor really is a powerful thing for them. And again, we're talking about words. For me now, the word survivor is completely irrelevant to my experience. That is something that happened to me, and it had impacted my life. And that is part of my story. Like, I can't change it. I can't, it's part of the story of my life. And I am here because of that part of the story. So I don't ever want to deny it or bury it any longer. And I'm not even a survivor of it. It's just something that happened. And so, yes, it had negative impact on me, but because of that, I've been able to find positive impact that I'm able to have in the world. And this work allowed me to rewrite that story and that identity, because I no longer was a survivor or somebody who had experienced this. I became my new story, which is that of a brave person. And that's where my healing journey really began, is when I started telling that story over and over and over again about this brave young girl. And I can't even begin to describe the healing over time that happened from retelling that story in a totally new way. That, I mean, that is literally just a part of my journey. And because I kept telling myself I was a brave girl, I started doing really brave things, and I've never stopped. So it's just had like so many profound effects on my own healing journey, and it just started like snowballing. Like, it just got better and better and better. And I think telling that story differently empowered me in ways that I still to this day have a hard time describing what happened. Because it just it's not even a identity that I resonate with anymore.
Yeah. What? Okay, I'm going to because I find this very powerful, and I'm going to sit with it for a moment, because I find what you said deeply spiritual, deeply cognizant of mindful approach. And early when we started this conversation, when I hit record, you expressed that there is no like one point of the start. The the point at which the work began or the journey began, it is probably very interconnected to different moments in your life. Like you were talking about poetry, being drawn to words. And ultimately, what I love about this approach, I'm going to have you go a little bit deeper into it in a moment, is you can see that you probably see this other in other people now that you work with them, that you can see that they will evolve if they feel like they're locked in their story that is causing trauma. There's hope, and that is what a lot of us are looking for, especially when we're trying to begin a new journey, perhaps the beginning of the year or any point in our life, going, can I ever get from here to where I want to be? Or I don't know where I can go, but I just may not necessarily want to be locked in this story. So I'd like for you to step into maybe the role of how you approach someone who may be very vulnerable, who's seeking healing, but they don't even see it in themselves, that they can rewrite their story.
Yeah, I think in the work that I do, it comes down to being radically present with my client. You know, what I see in this work specifically is that what makes it different than more traditional coaching is that I am part of the experience. I am part of holding the space and not necessarily walking them through a process. I am here to open up what your own voice, memory, and heart is needing to say. So I don't often focus on goals. I am very focused on the client, the words that they're choosing, what they're not choosing, and engaging in the space in that moment. So there's not a lot of pre work, there's not a lot of goal setting. It very much is what is in the space, and that is what is going to open up. The words start to come out, and it's like we're going on this dance of ultimately you're coming in as who you are in this moment. And you have a version of yourself that you ultimately want to be, but you don't really know what is holding you back. Like you can come in and say, oh, it's my boss, or it's, this experience I've had, this traumatic event or a relation. Like you can come in and say all those things, but those all are pretty surface. It's a matter of like getting into the moment and allowing the unveiling of these emotions and these words, and it eventually leads you to what really is holding you back, and we're able to open that up. And the way you move through it is that you have to be in it, and you have to understand how you are hoping, like who you are hoping to become and what you would do differently to become that person. So then it becomes more rooted in identity. And we start to do work on like, what does that look like? What would you do? How would you move through that? And it's really just taking that dance between who you are now to who you want to become. It's such a non-linear process, is very challenging to explain. And even when I work with women, they go through my group. I say the first 3 weeks, I say it almost continuum. This is non-linear. This is, if you are open, you will be amazed by the journey that is going to be laid out. But we need to trust each other, and we need to trust the universe. And it's just an incredible, it's an incredible experience.
Well, and you touched upon again, I feel like a huge element of spirituality. And I don't know if you do this because you already are a practicing whatever in meditation, what have you. However, the truth is always truth. Like it's universal. And I believe when you said it's non-linear, that holds true for the spiritual path. Like often it's not like, okay, I'm going to sit down and meditate and tomorrow I'm enlightened. No,
Yeah.
there's a constant discovery, and I apply different techniques and tools personally.
Yeah.
And in your path, what you're doing is something that I feel like it sounds a little bit woohoo, but maybe you can tell me your opinion on it. It's not about goal setting, because I'm actually beginning to set out my own, I don't want to call them goals, but what I aim to do for next year. And one of them is focus on the feeling, focus on what felt good in 2023, and focus on how I'd like to create the the emotions and how I need to arrive into the situations to create those emotions or feelings. Because often when we get to a goal, it's never about the goal. It was about the feeling. So I'd like for you to speak a little bit more about the non-linear, it being non-linear, can't
Yeah.
pronounce it. And
Yeah.
And the
Yeah,
feeling.
it's it's not, it's funny. Woo is such a word that's out there. And I don't resonate with that word. Okay. I'm a person of words, right? I don't resonate with that word, but I do have a deep connection, a deep spiritual connection to Mother Earth, to the universe, to those ideas. Um, but I understand being a person who has grown up or has navigated this Western society. I have been in the corporate world. I know what it's like to have, goals, deadlines, expectations. And I also know what it feels like when you're stepping into your true self, and that can't be defined all the time. And so I feel like I have this talent and skillful way of dancing between different worlds always. So I'm able to take women who have been very structured and allow them to break open, but not take them all the way to woo woo. Because for me, it's not about that. It's about, like, ultimately, you want to feel more empowered. You want to feel more at peace. You want better relationships. That's all what it's about. And it's in you to do that. So when I'm working with the women, it's really, they already know. They deeply already know what's blocking them. But it's a matter of the right guide to allow the conversation, the stories, the unveiling, the understanding of what that is, and bring it out into the light. But it doesn't happen like step one, step two, step three, right? But helping them see along the way what's happening allows those women who are used to a very structured environment, allows them to see that there is movement. And I think that does help, right? So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it is just, the more open a client or group of women who I'm working with is, the more they're going to discover what is meant for them to discover in this moment. And the funny thing is, sometimes they think it's this bigger thing, this bigger issue or challenge, and it almost 90% of the time ends up being something completely different.
And as you work with them, do you see that them stepping into, say, so let me step back a little bit. The approach itself, when you mention words, which is really powerful for myself as well, do they discover how their relationship has been in the words that they use, and becoming more cognizant or aware, like, wow, I've been describing this scenario and now I see myself with these words, and having an epiphany of sorts, saying, this is, I can shift the language now because this is how I would like to arrive in scenarios in my life.
Yeah, I think it happens so, like, naturally and organically as the weeks go on when I'm working with the women, that it's, and maybe it's in the way that I am sitting with them, that it is all there. Everything is there. I mean, as I'm sitting with them, they will literally say the same things over and over in a different way, or they'll use the same words, or their body language. There's something that will keep showing up, and sometimes it's not connecting. So as I'm watching them week after week, and they say one thing and they're doing something else, they're using one word, but then when they tie it together in a sentence or a story, it doesn't match to the word. or there's these little things that keep coming up that then begin to break open. And I know it's hard to explain. Um, I had this one woman who she kept telling the same story, and at the root of it, it was truly all about this word that she kept using was not helping her move forward, and she kept using that word over and over again. And I had to come back to her and say, like, what does this word mean to you? And that's when we started to unravel what the word meant. It wasn't the word itself, it was what the word meant, and it was the story it was tied to. And it ended up being, tied to a whole deeper story that went into her relationship with her mother, and nothing with what was happening in her life right now. And so it's hard to explain how the process works. It's more of just being radically present with my clients and understanding how their stories are coming out into the light, I guess.
No, it makes sense. You're the way you described it for me, I'm hearing that you, as a coach, you're very present, and the process, while it's organic and non-linear, it does allow you to, not to sound too ironic, but unveil the very nuances of things that are maybe unconscious, you bring to the awareness. And I imagine sometimes you see things before the clients do, like you're describing.
Yeah, and one of the things that, as a narrative coach, I don't typically call it back to the person. I often keep it open enough that they need to call it out, because the minute I call it out, it becomes my words and it becomes my observation and my perspective. So I need to keep asking the open questions, for them to come at the words themselves. And so that's also takes a lot of practice, because it's natural to want to say back to them, oh, this is what you said to me, or this is what I imagine you're saying, or, different versions of that. But at the end of the day, I truly want the client to come up with the words themselves, to be able to unravel those and to understand those, versus me using words. Because I've been in coaching where people have like used words and say, oh, it sounds like this is a burden. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, burden? Like, that's not the word I would have picked. And then all of a sudden, how I felt or the story I was sharing became a different story because of the word that they gave me, versus me choosing, oh, this was a discomfort, this was a heavy responsibility. Those two words are different than burden, right? So it depends on the person, on the words that they choose and what they hold with those words. So, that's another way, as I'm working with clients and practicing, being very mindful that this space belongs to them. I am only here to help them find the words and the answers for what they're trying to work through, because it really is, they already know. They already know. They just have to find it.
And words have energy. I believe that. And I've often, during my yoga training days, and even now as a coach, zero in on, are the words violent in nature? If that makes any sense. Sometimes we're
Yep.
unconscious. Like the other day, I was writing something out and like, knock two birds with one stone. Really? Do I need to say it that way?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's an article that I've been meaning to write forever. I laugh. Anybody who listens to this, they're gonna be, oh yeah, Lisa talked to me about that. Um, I really want to talk about, I call them the three T's, toxic, trigger, and trauma. Those three words I feel like add a lot of negative energy to a lot of the spaces within coaching, within media, within therapy, and oftentimes they just are not positive energy at all, and not necessary to be used in certain cases. A lot of people are talking about toxic people or toxic work environment. Well, if you go to the dictionary, toxic is a poison. Human beings are not poisonous. They might not be good for us. They might not be a good match. They may be having to heal and work on things, but they are not poisonous. And so there's a lot of things like that that we even talk within ourselves about our own experiences and our relationships and our workplace that need to be rewritten or understood. And, those are tied to deeper stories within us. And that is kind of, basis for a lot of the work. It's the words, it's the narrative, it's the meaning making of all of it. So I feel like I'm on soapbox now.
No, I loved it. I what personally got me really drawn into this conversation with you, and I think you had shared it with me in the past. Hold on one second, sorry. You've shared it with me in the past, is that your love for poetry. And when I was young and I lived in India, I spent a lot of time writing poems that came just very organically, naturally. I would write it, tear it up, and throw it away, and my mom would find them and save them. Not, and I didn't know that she was doing this. I didn't know until I got a little bit older. That was my way of managing emotions and
Yeah,
articulating things that were perhaps more esoteric in nature,
yeah,
but it was deeply meaningful. Like it was helping me heal. So
yeah,
what I'm hearing a lot of is this: it's a journey. It's not organic, and you are able to give a gift to. I think women need it, and give me one more insight into how or why you chose to work with women.
I don't know. I have been surrounded by women most of my life. I am the oldest of three sisters. My mother is the second eldest of four sisters and a brother. My grandmother, I think there are seven kids in their family, and there are four sisters. And I just grew up around a lot of women. Um, and I really truly believe that the world needs more healing of the feminine energy. So I don't know. I just moved into that space. And every time I'm being approached by people um, to help and support men, using this approach, it's never felt like the right space for me.
And I like the fact that you mentioned the feminine energy, and there's a huge connection between feminine energy and creativity, and often that is a path for healing. So that's a beautiful niche that you're in.
Yeah, I love it. I do love it.
Now, where are you headed in 2024 with this work?
Oh, yes. Well, 2024, I am continuing with my signature program. I have an online group coaching program called Uncover Your Truth. And that's all kind of under my Unveiled Beauty platform. And that program is a 6-week program. And we build out our life timeline like a story. I'm taking narrative coaching principles, I'm taking storytelling elements, and we kind of build this out. And in that process, we are hoping to shift some stories and identities. And that continues into 2024. And then I will also be launching a special community, a sisterhood community that will be unraveling words. So every month we'll be taking different words and talking about the connections we have with them and seeing if they will open up new areas within ourselves that we need further exploring. And that's going to be a great group of women where we come together and we do have some of those discussions and discovery work together. And that's really my focus for 2024. And then, as you know, since you've been a guest, I also have a podcast that I do on the side with my dear friend Anahita Champion, and that's called Life in Our Skin. And we talk to women in the middle. So women who share their American experiences, who live in between the white and the Black community. And we provide a space for those women particularly to share. So that's what I'm doing in 2024. And we'll see what else the universe has for me.
Now, any words of wisdom for someone who's curious about this work and like, what can I do next? Well, how can I discover more about myself? Anything that you can share? Or another way to ask you the same question is, what's your phrase or set of words for 2024?
Oh, I don't have a set of words for 2024 yet. I'm sure that will come, but I would say the biggest word that came up for me this past year, which likely will probably continue forward, is the word trust. My biggest advice to any woman or anyone who is feeling stuck, feeling misunderstood, just feeling unhappy in their life or their relationships, to trust yourself and trust the universe, because everything that you need is within you. And that's some of the most profound work that I've had to do, is just to trust myself.
I can second that. That's something that's been coming up for me. So trust is pivotal for my growth, and I believe a lot of other people. Lisa, this is really, really an honor. And when you start this program called for a community of women with words, I hope I can have you back, because I really find that uplifting to know that can come together and the narrative can shift, because sometimes it's knowing that other people are going through what you're going through, for me personally, has been a way to heal.
Yeah. And I mostly work with high achieving women, who are continuing to do really great work out in the world. And I do serve women in the middle very well, I think, because I can understand some of the nuances of being first generation college graduate, being immigrant, either an immigrant or a child of an immigrant family. Those are women that I can serve really well. And I love it.
Well, thank you, Lisa. I will have more information in the show notes, and I look forward to potentially having you back. And have a great 2024.
Thank you so much. I am so grateful to be here and chat with you today, and look forward to keep chatting in the future.
Absolutely. We're in each other's lives, and I'm so blessed to have you.
Thank you. Same here.